Welcome to the Cloud Pod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, GCP, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
Ryan,
and Peter.
Episode 194, recorded for January 4th, 2023. The Cloud Pod's New Year's resolution, change everything.
Yay.
Good evening, guys. How's it going? Happy New Year, of course.
Happy New Year.
New Year.
I mean, it just feels like just a couple days after 2020 still.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I don't know where the time goes, but it's been a fun week. I don't know if for non-tech news, like watching the House of Representatives not organize itself after multiple votes. That's great. It's good. It's a fun time to just see some of the craziness that's happening in the new year already, and it's only the first week. So if this is the beginning of the year and what we look forward to, it's gonna be a long one.
Well, hopefully we're just shaking it all out of the kinks, right? It's like a test run for the year. So it'll quiet down and become, a smooth running machine after this, right? Right?
I don't know. Well, it was a nice week to recharge, and while we recharged, Jonathan and I got together at our normal meeting spot, and we talked about the show, and we decided to change everything. So we're changing format a little bit. We're changing the things that we're doing just a little bit, and we'd love to hear your feedback. And so I would like to highlight, our Slack channel and our Twitter and I'm now on Mastodon. I don't know about you guys, but I made it over there as well. So you can always add us if you don't like the new format or you don't like the new changes. But we're going to focus a little bit on some of the big stories, but then really talk about other topics that we think are valuable and we can have some good discussions about over the next year. And we'll see how it goes. The lightning round has been officially retired after I won it for the third year in a row. Decided that it serves purpose. Now, if you're listening to us because you enjoy us talking about all the news, and you still want to be able to stay in touch on the news, we are still going to include all the news that we normally would have covered, but just in the show notes. So you can still find links to articles and things like that, so you can stay on top of it. You can subscribe to our newsletter on our website that gets emailed to you every Tuesday after, so you can always stay up on top of this. So again, we're trying to add more value in a different way, but I think we're still going to do a lot of fun things here. And so we'd love to hear your feedback via the Slack channel, the Twitters, the Mastodons, the email at, podcast at thecloudpod.net is always a good way to get us as well. Any way you want to reach us, let us know what you think, and we'll go through it. So let's jump into it. First up, we have a little bit of follow-up. We talked about Mark Benoit, the CEO of Salesforce, a few weeks ago, talking about how their new employees were lazy, which is my paraphrasing. But it was really just that they were less productive than they used to be. And so that resulted in a layoff of 10% of their workforce this week and a $1.4 billion restructuring blueprint. They are writing off about 7,000 employees after they grew to 73,000 employees over the pandemic. So, quick follow-up there that those type of questions, if your CEO is asking them rhetorically, may not lead to a good outcome for you, and keep that in mind.
Yeah, the original post did sort of have that smell about it, right? It's clearly, if nothing else, the thought process is going on. And so then that's where that comment came from. Maybe they didn't have concrete plans, but they had a problem to solve for sure. And that they were thinking about how to solve it.
And the first question was, make you start thinking about your weak performers. Mm-hmm. And then I come back to you 2 weeks later and say, okay, now lay off 12 of them. Which ones would you choose?
Force rank your employees for no particular reason. We're not going to use this for anything. Just go ahead and force rank them.
Yeah.
Subtle.
Please do. Well, Peter missed our last episode of the new year because of holiday shenanigans, which is fine. But he owes our listeners both a 2023 prediction and a favorite announcement. So, Peter, I'll let you start wherever you want to, but give us one of those two things.
Okay, I'm going to go with favorite announcement, Aurora Serverless V2, because I think that's one of the areas of sort of this magic middle spot of I don't want to write to some cloud native database with some proprietary API, but I want a cloud-like relational database. So I think Aurora Serverless is the cool direction to go. And V2 brought some features that make it more serverless and make it more convenient to use and more likely that we can use it. So I'm happy to see the development in that direction where, we're still using a industry standard API like Postgres, but we get all these serverless benefits. That was mine there. Any comments?
No, I think it's good. I think this is one of those highlight areas, though, that it's not necessarily as serverless as they make it seem, and it does have a pretty high price tag to it, but it's the right direction, and scale to zero, which V2 kind of gave you finally was the right answer, versus V1, which was, yes, you're serverless if you don't mind still paying for the server that's running in the background and the high latency of when it needs to scale.
Exactly. So that's fun.
Yeah, and I always forget that Aurora is both my MySQL and Postgres compatible, right? So like it is a very important distinction that it's flexible, right? You don't have to completely re-architect your app if you change your cloud provider or you decide that hosting it on-prem is more cost effective. And so it is, Aurora is always sort of that, enticing carrot for me, because it's like, I don't want to design to be flexible and move, because I feel like that does the service, it does a disservice, but it's also sort of, it's a nice to have in the back pocket for sure.
I think one of the things I really appreciate about Aurora, which actually came out with V1, was the RESTful interface, rather than having to maintain persistent connections from tens of thousands of containers. That's certainly been a change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good call out.
Agreed.
Cool. And then 2023 prediction. So Benioff is leading the charge along with Amazon and a couple others. But I think that we're going to have a decent recession here coming up. Everyone's predicting a very mild one, but I don't like the metrics that they're using to predict a mild recession. So I think it's going to be a little deeper. And I think there is a ton of over hiring in the SaaS and technology space. And we're going to see significantly more developers getting laid off from big tech companies that really had, sort of either virtual monopolies or enough growth to where they really weren't forced to build efficient companies. And now they're going to be forced to get efficient. And that's going to mean not, letting every single department run all sorts of science projects for fun that never deliver any value to the company. So I think that if you look at the core value of Google, you look at the core value of Meta, the core value of Salesforce and Amazon, and then these companies are forced to become efficient and only focus on those core values, there could be a really significant number of developers and engineers laid off there. And then also to become more competitive, driving automation solutions for the ops and deployment side of the house.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think for last year, I saw the final number was about 150,000 tech layoffs globally we're seeing. So, do you have a number you kind of think about and what you think the number might look like from a global layoff in tech?
So you're saying, what was the number?
150,000 globally were laid off by the end of December, at least, through public filings. And again, we'll only track public filings, but
yeah. So I bet it's at least double that in 2023.
Got it. Well, let's hope that's not true. Just because
it's hard to bet against, though.
It's hard to bet against
the indicators.
I do hope it doesn't come to fruition.
I heard these crazy numbers from some other people, like in private equity, who estimate that most SaaS companies could lay off 3/4 of their engineers and developers and still run effectively. So
wow,
I don't think that's necessarily correct. Like, I think that's overblown a little bit. That's PE people not understanding what it takes to run a
I think if
company,
so I think from the PE perspective, what they're looking at is your product makes money, right? So you sold to 1 million users and you're making $500 million ACV, and you've got this big tech team that you've built out to develop innovation, and you're trying to chase the next 100 million users. But the current million users you have are very profitable and are very happy with your product, ideally. And so if I were to cut down your development team, instead of focusing on innovation, I'm focusing on incremental changes and maintenance. How much more revenue can I still derive out of that business over the next 5 years? That would make that interesting. And so that's what I think you're hearing the PE firms basically say, is that all this focus on innovation is expensive. And if innovation isn't required for the product, do I really need a team of 400, 500 developers for $1 billion company? Or can I get away with 100 developers and maintain and do incremental fixes and changes or lipstick on a pig in some cases, where you just do a big major UI refresh and all of a sudden people think it's magically new. That is the big question that PE firms typically ask when they're looking at how they want to do an acquisition of a company. I mean, it happens all the time.
There's some irony in that, really.
Yeah,
Yep.
and it's a big departure from, if you're a publicly traded company, because the street typically, unless you are growing your revenue, they will sink you.
Yep, totally. But if you're a PE firm,
it's about maximizing profits for the PE firm.
You don't have to worry about what they think. Yeah, bring them private. Don't worry about what they think.
Of course, those businesses would never have become profitable if the investment hadn't been made in innovation to begin with. So it's sort of,
well, but again, when they're buying companies that are either in position 1, 2, or 3 in a market, the momentum of that market position will get them a long way. And so the question is, how much more innovation does this product really need to continue to derive revenue, and is it still competitive in the market against its competitors, knowing that they have a long way to catch up?
And they can always cut bait, right? When it does start to decline, because if you don't innovate, then someone's going to come and do the same thing that you do, but slightly better. And as the market shifts over to that new solution, a private equity firm will divest itself of that investment or double down, perhaps if they see the potential. But
again, let's get out of the depression stories.
Yeah.
Let's move to the news this week. So we had a general, we're in the post New Year's period of time. So there's lots of great articles around like things to look for in tech in 2023, or, let me expose you to new tools and DevOps for 2023. And I looked at that list and 6 of them I already knew about. So they weren't that new, but there are all kinds of things out there. And this one caught my eye a little bit. It's from The Information. And they're basically were saying some of the 2023 tech trends to kind of keep an eye out. And I thought they were sort of interesting. And a lot of it's driven by the fact that the stock market is pivoting away from growth at all costs to profitable growth. And so, they have some picks that they made, and I thought we should talk about them real quick. So the first one is that a new VC capital playbook will come to bear. The last 5-year playbook has been, basically the industry figuring out the next one. Late stage private investors would pick up growth-based companies typically once they reach a certain size, and those companies have completely retreated from the market. And so will VCs now basically start looking for back to basics and proven founders, or they go for even newer, riskier growth areas? Which if that was crypto, I'm not sure that was a good choice.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure where they would go. That's riskier than that. But it's an interesting idea and concept. But yeah, I think there is probably some retreading and some retrenching that's going to have to happen in the VC world.
Yeah, I hope they don't go too far down the path of proven founders, because I feel like that, you start shrinking the pool of possibility there, and it gets a little, incestuous, where everything starts to kind of have the same look and feel, and it's just different takes on the same sort of, maybe it's a different area, but I don't know. I feel like it's too restrictive, but I also feel like the growth at any cost and the sort of showering money to see what sticks will have to stop, because I don't think that they can continue to take their risks and that they were when everything was a little bit more bullish.
I would think responsible VC companies would have experts. They would adopt those proven entrepreneurs and proven inventors, bring them on board and use them to help guide startups and to help choose who they invest in. So I think there needs to sort of be have a consultancy function as well as just a capital function.
I mean, I'm all for that, because I do think that, a proven founder has great insights. They've done it before and they can help everyone around, and then you get the best of both worlds. And so it's why, a lot of founders join boards of directors and stuff in other companies as well. Cool.
It's going to be interesting, though, to see if these, valuations come down and all these VCs, especially new ones, who started funds and now they're going to be looking at down rounds in their, existing investments, how they communicate that to their existing investors and how they raise their next round. I mean, I think we're going to see some fallout with a lot less investors interested in going the VC route when that starts to happen. and relatively new VC groups disappearing, a lot of that funding drying up. And then, what are the alternative options? The alternative options are going to be investment vehicles that are a lot less willing to give millions of dollars and say, go spend it as fast as you can just for growth. So,
yeah, very true. All right. Well, the second one was big tech will start getting desperate. They highlighted Meta, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft are all dealing with the challenges of reduced stock market value, which also has impacts on their talent, strategic and competitive questions, and new challengers coming to the market. They also talked about the engine of online advertising basically petering out. Amazon's lock on e-commerce potentially slipping, and Microsoft and Apple really are looking for that next growth engine for their businesses. And overall, I agree. I think they all sort of are in this crisis mode. I think Meta is in a crisis mode more than the rest of them, and that's why they've been making some risky bets on like VR and some other areas in the metaverse. And the market's not reacting well to that. So I think that's also going to be an interesting bellwether for Google and Amazon and Microsoft, because are they going to want to go risky, knowing that the market's not going to appreciate that? But they got to figure it out.
Yeah, Meta's definitely in a class of its own, because I think the product that they grew up with is very generational, and I think that that generation is older now. Maybe they don't have time for that anymore. Maybe they don't care for those things. They have other concerns. Yeah, I think I don't think the VR stuff came soon enough. They haven't done a good job of selling it. So I kind of put them in a different class. As far as Google, Amazon, Microsoft goes, I mean, Google especially, they're definitely going to get desperate because there's no money for online advertising, and that's where most of their revenue came from. I kind of like to see a paid service, for people, not businesses necessarily, but I would happily pay for Gmail and pay for those services in exchange for not having my email read, or some other kind of benefits, or free storage or something else. I wouldn't mind paying for those things to keep Google live, because it's a valuable service. Whereas Metro, I think, doesn't really have that kind of grip on me.
yeah, but to me, like Google, what percent of their revenue comes from advertising spend, right? AdWords, effectively, in its various forms. And what percent of its engineers are dedicated to that? Like, I think that it's pretty lopsidedly high amount of revenue coming from that service versus the number of engineers associated with Google. And then look at all the other things Google does that it doesn't do great, but spends a lot of money on R&D on.
Like
I think
cloud?
Everyone's got to focus on their core, right? I'm going to leave cloud out of it because
For reasons.
yeah, for reasons. But yeah, I mean, if you look at, I think Microsoft is probably the one that's going to have the easiest time dealing in these challenges. Microsoft is used to it. They're completely different market. The places where they compete are not. I don't think are as. I don't know. I think Microsoft's in a better position. I think Google and Meta are going to have to focus on their core,
yep,
and not just spend all their time looking for science projects to hire engineers to try a new market.
Well, and I think a science project with a clear path to revenue is a good thing to do, but I think Google has a lot of science projects that have no clear path or very little
Right.
revenue, or again, it's what's the growth drivers for Google outside of ads. Cloud could potentially be one of those. They still have to catch up in a large part of the area that they're lacking compared to Azure and to Amazon. But I think that's why they're big on it. But also I could see them divesting that business at some point too, because again, it's not making money today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do agree with you though on Microsoft. Even when I was reading this out to you guys, I was thinking about that in my head. Microsoft's been through a couple times. I mean, the Windows era to the services era, and they kind of lost their way a little while, and they tried to go into hardware devices, and that was a terrible disaster for them. And now then they moved into cloud services and Azure, and that's been better. But remember Bing, Bing was a terrible chain they were trying to chase the Yahoo business and being a competitor to Google. And then they realized, well, why don't we just do what we do well, which is take our shit we installed on-prem and turn that into services and then charge more money for them. And that worked out really well for them.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
Totally.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. I think that, Meta was right to pull the trigger. I don't think it was too early, but I do think that the market for metaverse just isn't there. But like I said, it's sort of like that sucks. But they're right to go after something because their user base is aging out effectively. And it's just that when your audience comes for content and your audience is the content, like the smaller that gets, it's going to perpetuate and just decline very quickly. We've seen it before with MySpace. Google, I think they have to streamline. I think they need to be smarter with what they invest in and can't keep, like they had all the money for a long time. And so there's a lot of standards and processes where they can act like they have all the money. And I think that's going to be the biggest change for them. I don't think the business is going to be in trouble. I think that I think they have all the capability and all the smarts to do it, and they will. Same with Amazon, really. And Microsoft, just keep doing what you're doing, right? Yeah. They'll be fine.
Well, the first Oculus came out in 2016, so what's that, 8 years? Almost 8 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like the technology advanced quickly enough to let them monetize it as soon as they wanted. They've kind of missed the boat a little bit.
I think the entry point's too expensive still too. I mean, like the cost of an Oculus Rift is cost prohibitive. Like, I mean, the Quest is the cheaper version, which gets you more into the entry level point, but the technology is not as good. I mean, the Oculus Quest is basically the original technology you just mentioned from 2006 or 2016. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think even looking at other alternatives, because I'm not a big fan of the Meta platform because it lacks parental controls, it lacks a lot of things that I would expect for a platform like that to have. Alternatives, are all even more expensive. So that's a market that I think has potential, and we'll come back to that in a minute here because it's actually another prediction that's on the list. But it'll be interesting to see how Meta kind of evolves. Well, the next one is mission critical. Enterprise software executives are worried about converting their products from being discretionary to mission critical. Against the recession and companies slashing their tech budgets, don't be surprised if people don't start asking, is Slack really that critical? Or, this fancy cloud thing you bought for analytics, is it really adding the value you want? And a lot of this actually think is driven by the fact that there's been an over emphasis on digital transformation for the last few years. And so I think people are going to really start asking, like, is this digital transformation actually adding value or saving money or doing what it promised to do? And is that going to make you rethink some of those spend categories? And that's an interesting question. It definitely made me think when I read through this one.
I mean, I agree that that's exactly what's going to happen, but I don't think the emphasis on cloud transformation or digital transformation is in air. I think that execution just hasn't happened. There hasn't really been the commitment you'd see for a lot of businesses to make the changes needed to actually do it. So lots of words talking about this is the future and where companies are going and what they need to do and adopt all these things, but very little actual commitment to it. And now with, in an economic downturn, like that's not going to be possible because it's all R&D and it doesn't have very clear path to revenue. And so it's like, it feels very much like a missing of a window that's going to have repercussions for years to come.
Yeah. Number 4, AI, AR, and VR, and the next platform of the future. And they highlighted that only tech executives excited right now are those in the AI space who are doing amazing things with GPT and showing what the potential future of the world might look like. And then, of course, augmented and VR are polarizing, but maybe on the verge of a breakthrough, especially if the rumored Apple augmented reality headset comes out this year, as predicted.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you've hit the nail on the head earlier when you're talking about the platform of Oculus just not being good enough, right? I think that all the investment has been in the technology of virtual reality and the optics to the user, and none of the investment has been on the platform. And I really feel like this is going to take, to get a real advancement, it's going to take collaboration across multiple companies. Like you're going to have to take Microsoft's Xbox platform and Oculus and sort of, combine the two, right? Because then you've got a delivery for games, and you've got a marketplace, and you've got the content management and the restrictions, and then the technology. And I just feel like everyone's trying to do their own thing to keep the money themselves, including Apple. And I just don't think it's going to succeed.
I don't think Facebook is the right, or Meta is the right company to be driving this, because their whole incentive is to build a walled garden metaverse, which, I think they would probably be a lot better at building the community after VR has penetrated the market and being sort of the killer app, not being the one that innovates on the VR technology itself, specifically for their own walled garden. Like, I don't see that leading to success. It feels like two completely different focuses of like the type of company who'd be good at one is by definition bad at the other.
Well, I mean, this is Apple versus Microsoft, open versus closed. And there's a lot more money available to you in open, but you have to have a much more mature platform in open to be successful. Versus closed, you can be, the best at what you do, but it has to be really high quality. And I feel like in the case of Meta, neither one of those exists for an Oculus. The open platform sucks, and the closed garden is not perfect. And so you run into that problem of, these gaps, and those are holding it back.
I mean, to me, it would be like trying to get the first version of Facebook, trying to get people to sign up for the first version of Facebook before people knew what the World Wide Web was.
Yeah.
Right. Trying to create the World Wide Web yourself for the sole purpose of running Facebook. Yeah. It's like that's a big ask.
Well, the other thing about Facebook was that they didn't invent social media. We had GeoCities when I was a kid, and then we had MySpace, and we had all these other technologies out there, and I mean, even go back as far back as ICQ and AIM and all the instant messengers. That was kind of the beginning of some social stuff too.
Telnet servers. I'm old. Yeah. I'm really old.
BBS dial-ins. All right. Okay. But you go back to this thing, but Facebook just took what existed out there and made it better, and they made it consistent, and they made it a better platform. And that's what won the day for them at the end of the day. But they didn't invent that space. They just, improved it. And I think that's the challenge. They're trying to invent Oculus, and they've never invented anything.
Yep.
I mean, I think there's a bit of a gap in, who are the users supposed to be? I mean, do you expect businesses to set up virtual storefronts and have like a person sitting in an office constantly wearing VR glasses, attending to virtual customers who walk in? I mean, there's definitely some niche applications in the medical profession with augmented reality overlaying things, for surgeons or remote surgery with robotics and things like that. Those are cool, but that's not what they're going for. That's a very niche, very specialized, incredibly expensive piece of hardware, I would think. Mm-hmm. You're not going to buy an off-the-shelf Oculus and then go do heart surgery on somebody 2,000 miles away.
Yeah. I mean,
Zuckerberg did like a 3-hour with on the Joe Rogan podcast, specifically around Meta and VR. So hearing his position on this, I mean, he is just so, you can tell it's what he's super interested in. Mm-hmm. How the little discussions he has around, whether or not your view should see your arms versus just your hands floating in space, and how people respond to different interfaces. He's super interested in it.
Yeah, but
it is interesting.
He's also not a guy who builds a business. There was no monetization plan for Facebook until Sheryl Sandberg got there.
I know. Exactly.
So that's all cool ideas and cool conceptually. And if you were a startup, with a few $100 million in a capital investment, you could answer those questions. But you're in a business that expects bajillions of dollars in growth and ad sales and things that you're just not delivering as a business. That's why the market's just beating them up. So
yeah.
And then finally, the last one is talent management is going to become a major topic for companies with tech layoffs. Talent wars may have cooled off a little bit. But again, there's no sign the pendulum has fully swung back and employers have all the leverage again. And that's why, I think some people are reacting negatively to, back to office edicts that are trying to come out now in 2023. And overall, the people who are leaving companies are still regrettable. They're people you don't want to have leave. And so, when you say do more with less, it really means find new ways to recruit, train, and retain the best people so you can do more with less. And that's going to be the big challenge for talent management over the next year. And I think that's true.
Mm-hmm. No, it's exactly what I see. Like it's there are a lot of, layoffs. And so the market of potential candidates is large, but it's, the people who are making those decisions are choosing the ones that will impact the business the least, right? And so you're seeing a larger pool of candidates, but there's significant gaps in skill sets and experience, and it's it's tricky right now to be in the hiring market. And because of that, if you are a demonstrated performer in a business, like, you don't really have to worry about that larger pool and the competitive nature of the job market, because you'll stand out. And so it's, if you're not working to retain your employees, they'll go somewhere else, because it's easy to, if you throw enough incentives at them, they are already there and they stand out, and that's what everyone needs right now. So I think it's more the continuation of the gap in cloud skills particularly, but in tech overall.
Agreed. All right, well, let's move on to our AWS news story this week. And I lost my tab. Computer problems. There we are. First up, for Amazon Neptune announces a Graph Explorer, an open source visual exploration tool for low code users. This will be available to you in the Apache 2.0 license. You can effortlessly browse labeled property graphs, or LPGs, or resource description frameworks, RDFs, data in a graph database and discover connections between data without having to write graph queries. The tool provides a React-based web app that can be deployed in a Docker image to visualize graph data, and you connect to either Neptune or any Tinkerpop, Gremlin, or Sparkle 1.1 endpoints with the new tool.
Can you imagine if you're out not in this industry, just listening to the names of these products and technologies? It's like, what are they talking about?
Yeah. I'm just jealous I didn't think of Tinkerpop Gremlin.
Tinkerpop Gremlin.
It looks pretty, but can you imagine, what kind of value you're going to get out of a tool like this? It's going to be great for taking screenshots for presentations. It's going to be perhaps interesting to browse through data and dig in manually, but the size of data sets that people are working with nowadays in the terabytes or petabyte scale, I don't see that much value for a low or no code solution that draws pretty pictures of.
It was interesting because I had the same thought when I was reading through it, and in the article, and I didn't summarize it in my summary here, but they mentioned that by being able to visualize the data, you could actually find new graph links between data sets more easily by being able to visualize it in some cases. And so that potentially could then lead to you being able to use the data in different ways you hadn't been able to in the past. So if that's a true statement of like a problem people have, then potentially being able to visualize it could help you. But I don't know how true it is. Because again, like we get into graph databases and I sort of have lost the thread on them because I don't really understand it as well as I like to. But endless relationships and graphs is important. And how do you see that visualization?
I mean, it could be interesting to visualize systems that are documented in GraphDBs. Imagine you've got HVAC systems in huge buildings and things, all the connected services and bits and pieces. It's kind of like, I've seen this before. It's a Unix system from Jurassic Park in a way.
I mean, I think it's just part of the low code, no code, sort of, democratization of these computer resources, and it's not going to stop. It's, it continues to advance. And so what's going to happen, a biggest argument against these things is that, they're going to work for just the purpose fit that they're designed to work for, and not have the flexibility within the presentation layer to do anything, outside of those confines. And so it's sort of innovation stifling. But what's going to happen is, because there still are software developers and they're developing these low code and no code solutions like this one, I think that we'll start to see those edge cases diminish, or at least move. So it's kind of interesting, because it is like, I'm not sold on no code or low code yet, but I am starting to see like cracks in my opinion form. Well, as I'm just exposed to it daily now.
I mean, if you can use a tool, a low-code tool or a no-code tool to build the code, then great. You can go in and you can build the queries by clicking through the console and then codify those things, and maybe that just accelerates the dev process.
It also accelerates the learning process.
Yeah,
because use the no-code thing, and then look at the code it created, and you're like, oh, that's how that works. And then you can write it yourself or tweak it yourself later when you get better at it. That make people productive right away.
Yeah, any existing app that I've had to learn that has a static data set, like the first thing you do is start just examining all the tables, right? Not looking through every record, but like, how is it organized? What are the table headers? How, these types of things. And so like, if you can do that with a very clickable and easy UI.
Have you been waiting months and months to hire your new AWS, GCP, or Azure architect, only to have them be poached at the 11th hour by a startup with a juice bar? Initiatives stalled because you're having trouble hiring? Well, I have a simple solution: Foghorn Consulting. Foghorn Consulting provides top-notch cloud engineers to the world's most innovative companies and can be burning down your DevOps and cloud backlogs as soon as next week. Foghorn certified AWS, GCP, and Azure professionals are armed with infrastructure as code, and from day one will be designing performant, optimized cloud-native or hybrid environments that deliver on the promise of cloud. Their FogOps solution even provides on-demand cloud engineering to augment your existing teams. Visit www.foghornconsulting.com or send an email to cloudtalentnow@foghornconsulting.com and tell them the CloudPod sent you. Your dedicated FogOps team is with you for the long haul, and they bring their own juice.
The AWS Transfer family has now released some new features around PGP decryption. And I know when I first saw AWS Transfer launched with workflows, I thought the very first use case was, for PGP decryption and encryption capabilities. That's a very common use case you have for for FTP and SFTP. But now AWS Transfer is giving you built-in support for PGP decryption, removing the toil of building and maintaining your own workflow, which, thank you goodness. You can configure and automate the decryption of files that are encrypted using PGP keys by their users before upload, making it easier to meet their data protection and compliance requirements. Right now, this is for incoming files, but I do assume that if you're delivering files through SFTP in the future, it may make the ability to encrypt as well. Although I do sort of feel like this is something you really should have in your app so customers can do key management things, but you can now use AWS to basically orchestrate that, which is nice. But again, where you put this is kind of important, especially for your end user interactions with it. But thank goodness, this is the big thing I always wanted from SFTP workflows was PGP encryption. There's other amazing things you can do with workflows too. There's a lot of other endless possibilities around pre-processing, post-processing, et cetera, that are also really great. But a very common use case is PGP encryption and decryption operations. And so, thank you, Amazon. Appreciate this one.
Awesome.
Yeah, with any managed service, you're like, oh, thank God, I don't have to manage FTP anymore. Yeah. And then you're like, but it doesn't do the things I need that I'm currently doing for the business. Yeah. So it's good to see that these enhancements, because I still don't want to manage that.
Yeah, and workflows gave you the option to do it, but then you had to go write the code and you had to, figure out how to import PGP keys and how do you manage all like there was a lot of lifting to do to handle all that before. So
yep.
Let's move to GCP. They didn't have a lot of new stuff for us this week, but they did have their 2023 security operations trends for the SOC team, specifically the SOC. And I thought this was an interesting perspective on a 2023 list. So there's 5 predictions here. I'm going to run through them a little bit quickly, then we can maybe talk about each of them if you want to, or talk about the ones that are interesting. First one is prediction number 1, SOC meet cloud, cloud meet SOC. Prediction number 2, AI advances for attackers. Prediction 3, the way SOCs are staffed will greatly change. Prediction 4, the attack surface will get deeper consideration by the SOC. And number 5, hybrid work didn't hear any bell yet, and SOC will need to get serious about this area. So overall, it's sort of interesting to me because when I was reading through this, I was realizing, my SOC team doesn't really understand cloud. They don't really have this perspective, and so this whole idea that they're going to have to figure out cloud in a much better way. And one of the things the article recommended was that if you're a SOC person reading this article, the very first thing you should learn is IAM. And I'm like, yeah, you should actually. That's a really good place for the SOC to add value and look at credentials and how we're building IAM policies and say this is okay or not okay, etc. So very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we've a lot of traditional security operations has been at the infrastructure level, tracking packets and using the header information of those packets for identification, and none of that really works on cloud anymore because they're IPs are duplicated, MAC addresses are sort of programmatically spoofed, in order to keep them unique, and it's really difficult to use those traditional methods to watch traffic and follow a thread that you're looking for. And so the more you understand, when an application is using a managed service and what that call is going to look like, and the access controls that are there to protect access to that managed service, like the better that you can actually do your job in security operations. And I feel like it has lagged behind for quite a long time now.
I think the difference is it was very much static infrastructure before. Like you say, fixed IP addresses, fixed things. And now, so it's easy to monitor servers doing particular things, but now it's not about the servers, it's about the service itself. And so if you've got these ephemeral containers that spin up and spin down, auto scale throughout the day, you can never really say, well, that particular container did a thing. You have to look at the service as a whole. And I think it's a gap in the tooling, not just a gap in the skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The one that kind of gave me a little bit of a pause when I was writing up the notes was this AI advances for attackers. And basically, with AI becoming more available, it opens up ways for attackers to easily create exploits, create more creative content for phishing and malware distribution. And just as much as your dev teams are excited about this, the attackers are able to leverage these things too. And that now all of a sudden makes things much more difficult for your SOC team and your phishing campaigns and all these things. And that one, was like, oh yeah, that's going to get bad because no longer am I relying on a third party, non-native English speaker to be writing a terrible email about uploading my Bitcoin. Now all of a sudden they can tell the AI to write them an email in that basic concept that actually makes sense and is logical.
And it's enriched its data set with personal information about you. And so it can call you by your nickname and generate trust. Like it's scary. It's a scary future. Just as much as like deep fake video is scary because like what can you trust? The same thing is happening across multiple, areas.
Yeah, initially, my initial response, my thought just with AI in general and security is, wow, this is great. We have AI to help us find exploits and find attackers. But then you put the shoe on the other foot and you're like, wow, wait a minute. If they start using these technologies, I think like you learn like in martial arts, everyone likes the cool defenses, but when you do things competitively, you quickly find out that all other things equal, the attacker has the advantage. And AI versus AI definitely gets scary for us defenders.
I think it'll drive a lot more sort of walled garden type approaches to things. I mean, if you think about it, you can receive an email and Outlook from anybody anywhere in the world potentially, and you can open a document which may or may not contain macros or code or something else. It makes absolutely no sense. That's a terrible security posture. Why would you ever leave yourself in that position? But that's the position we find ourselves in after all these years. I like the iOS implementation where each app is its own little box and they can't talk to each other. They can't do their own things. I think we need to think about moving desktop applications into a similar kind of model, really, to sort of enforce boundaries between things and prevent phishing attacks or other kinds of attacks from exfiltrating data or doing whatever else, stealing credentials.
Yeah, it says the Android guy. Okay, makes sense.
Hey, I'm not made of mine.
I just picture the sales rep meeting someone at a conference and then finding out they can't email them until they go through the process of getting their company vetted and whitelisted so they can send an email follow-up. I don't want to be in sales anymore.
No.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds horrendous. Well, that's it for the new news this week. Let's move to our new series, the Cloud Journey series. Hopefully there's music that played. I don't know. Jonathan's tasked with finding a new intro for it. But this is a new thing we're doing. And we looked around and said, we have, I don't know, at least 60 to 70 years of cloud experience on this podcast, like just sitting here talking to you at home. And we thought, how do we help people coming new into cloud or who are thinking about cloud transformation? And so we said, let's start focusing on some topics, and let's do so. We're created this little mini series, and so this first one we're going to do is on the Cloud Center of Excellence, or the CCOE for short. And so we have a couple episode arc planned out here to talk about CCOE in depth, and so we'll stitch this all together so you can download just this part of the show at some point in the future when we're all done. But this is something you'll be able to find reference on the website and be able to do. But it also happens to be that Ryan and I are building out a CCOE right now too. So it was also well strategically planned. And so first of all, let's talk about Cloud Center of Excellence. I'm like, what the heck is this thing, guys?
I mean, I'm not going to go first. I have just been doing this for too long, and
come on,
I have all probably wrong opinions, but they're mine.
Well,
so.
I can tell you, Amazon invented it. And they invented it through basically taking best practices that they were seeing in many of their companies that were buying AWS Web Services, and they codified a set of things that they felt were key success criteria to being able to be successful in the cloud. And so they focus on things about, getting buy-in with executives, standardized ways you do VPC implementations, the ways that you think about IAM permissions and your account structures. And, it evolved over time, right? Like, I remember when Amazon, originally had no firewalls and no VPCs. And so this all changed over time. And so basically this concept of a center of excellence kind of became, this is your tiger team who is your cloud experts and your people who really understand the cloud in a big way and are driving some type of strategic outcome for a business around cloud.
And how's it any different, right? If you think about how's it any different from, IT's been changing all along. And what did we do before? We simply stuck with our ITIL framework with our, and introduced new products or updated new products or services for our companies. And now it's different, right? The cloud actually made companies change their organizational model.
I think it's less about the people and more about what the business grants to the Cloud Center of Excellence in terms of its responsibilities. Because I think I think the Cloud Center of Excellence, you know what? CCOE, there we go. That's way easier to say.
Yeah.
It really has to be the go-to place for cloud governance and best practices.
Well, I think it really came up out of a gap, right? So there was a traditional way of adopting cloud, and that was going through your IT departments, who were the same teams responsible for maintaining and providing physical infrastructure to your business. And as those teams were trying to adopt cloud, they weren't being very successful because of some shortcomings and ways of working that you need to start thinking and acting differently when providing a service to a business. And I feel like that's what Amazon did when they sort of created the Center of Excellence. Sort of, the definition of it in the blog post. And they even had a course that Justin and I took where they defined, basically it's not just how to use cloud technology, which is what the IT teams were focused on. It's how do you provide the value of cloud into your business and succeed, right? Because it's more than just the technology offerings and the margin and the profit value of being able to get to a market faster. And so it's a lot more complex than that.
But we didn't need a virtualization center of excellence when virtualization became prevalent, and we need one for cloud. And I think it has a lot to do with how quickly and how dramatically it changed the environment, and then how few skills were available to get people, to adopt this new technology. And so now it's like, okay, how do we deal with the skills gap, deal with this huge change in how we're going to deal with technology moving forward, and not have to wait until we can build that set of skills ourselves, and it'd be pervasive across our entire organization. So, hey, let's start with this tiger team, this CCOE, and then we'll have that capability internally. It might be small at first, but at least we have it.
Well, I guess the virtualization center of excellence would have been a virtualization team who specialized in building various, hypervisors out or managing that type of thing. But I think the Cloud Center of Excellence is not an operational team in the same way. I think they help guide processes, define processes and guide processes to help cloud adoption. But I don't think they're not hands-on in the same way.
It's the value, right? So if you think about the value of virtualization, right, you're getting density of compute. You can thin provision, you can do a whole bunch of stuff, but in the end, it's the same operating model, just more.
I think
the value of cloud is not.
Sorry, Ryan. I thought you were done. No, I was going to say, I think the key thing about virtualization, you're talking about something that impacts infrastructure. You're talking about cloud. You're talking about changing a lot. The way you buy hardware turns into from CapEx to OpEx. The way that you align your technology investments changes. The way you have to get billed is monthly and not predictable necessarily. And I think that's the big difference in a CCOE versus the legacy transformations that happen. Because the virtualization thing, going from physical hardware to virtualization, was a huge transformation in IT, but it only touched IT. It didn't bother anybody else. No one else gave a crap about it. But this case in cloud, it changed. Like the CFO has to be involved. The C-suite has to know. You're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of commitments to Amazon, a bookseller, for goodness sakes. And I think that just takes a different mentality. And that's why I think, even when Gartner kind of finally codified what they thought a cloud center of excellence into, they really broke it down to three key distinct areas of focus: governance, brokerage, and community. And really in governance, it's around, aligning to a technical strategy, aligning to a business strategy, getting centralization, guardrails, policies, procedures, guidelines. And then moving into brokeraging, it's like picking the right providers, picking the right solutions, the right architectures, the right partners you're going to go with. And then on the community, then how do you take all of that governance and brokerage and how do you make it a community of practice? How do you make it collaborative? How do you train people? How do you knowledge share? How do you get them through the change management of cloud? Because change management is just as complicated as picking a cloud. Is now understanding the mindset to cloud native. That's a change management process. It involves HR in many cases.
Yeah, not to mention now we have developers designing and provisioning infrastructure.
Right? Yeah, non-infrastructure experts that are calling an API. Yeah. Right. So it's like there's a learning gap there where to compare to virtualization again, like it was a smaller gap, right? You had to create the virtualization layer and you had to do a couple extra things. But then once you established that, it was exactly the same as when you were running on a server. And, like cloud is not that, right? There's not only do you have to learn a new set of skills, but the way you develop is different. The way you provide, show back value to the business is different. And it's kind of crazy for a lot of businesses. And I think that's why a lot of businesses weren't successful in adopting cloud. Like startups, sure. Because, it's like the teams figure it out and they didn't have an operating model that they were coming from, that they had to change. And it was an easy enabler. But once you started getting into the enterprise markets, I think the Cloud Center of Excellence really started gaining traction because mid-market enterprise, it's a lot bigger entity to move to a new process.
I keep imagining a political cartoon with an auto-scaling group going to the change control board meeting to spin up a new instance.
Well, Gartner called it community, but I think it's more importantly, really more about the hearts and minds kind of thing. I think if you can have all the best strategies in the world, but if you can't convince the people who work for you or the people who work for the company or the people who work on the projects that it's the right thing to do, and sort of give them confidence in their ability to learn and help them grow as individuals from perhaps legacy roles into cloud roles, then you're not going to go anywhere. So I think probably the most important function of the Cloud Center of Excellence is winning people over.
Yeah, evangelization. Exactly. Yeah. That's when I define it. That's exact. Gartner didn't have all the terms broken out when I started down this journey. And so like when on my internal sort of like structure mapping, it's literally like almost like a religion, you're evangelizing why this is better, why this is, the advantages. And here's all the things that adopting this new model will benefit you, right? Like not what's good for the business, what's not, like it's also good for the business, but it's actually going and winning that developer is heart and mind. So like to adopt this new pattern, and here's the changes you need to make to see those benefits. It's a big part of it.
So, we talked about what it can do and why, what it is and kind of the charter or whatever, but who's part of the CCOE at the end of the day? Who do you think is your key players in the CCOE conversation?
It does a lot, right? It's hard. This is I almost feel like this might turn into its own position at some point, because I feel like it's the skill set that's required, I think, to be on a successful CCOE, especially one that's starting that is small, is you have to not only, develop educational content, but you have to be a technical expert to define why one technology solution is better than another. And so therefore you have to understand the business problem that you need to solve, from a value and a time to market perspective. And then you also need to understand the finance areas of what the impact to the business is going to be. And so like you think about being on a Cloud Center of Excellence, that's a lot of different hats to wear. And, sometimes you get a principal engineer who's pretty business savvy, and they can serve both and trying to do that, but it is quite the challenge.
Well, you definitely don't want it to be too big of a group, because you don't want your center of excellence to actually be doing a lot of the work. You want them to be setting the standards, setting the guidelines, setting some of the guardrails, but it shouldn't necessarily be the team doing the work. And so I think that's
Right.
the key thing, around what you bring into it and what stakeholders you have. And when we talk to Amazon, in their charter, what they think this is, they talk about architects, they talk about HR people potentially for change management in cases in some large organizations. They talk about security should be part of your CCOE, finance or a FinOps practice should be part of your CCOE. And ultimately, people who understand code and on the engineering side, as well as the infrastructure people who understand the infrastructure pieces. Because like you said, this is the first time engineering is now calling an API to run a SQL server, and they don't know how to actually run a SQL server well. And the infrastructure guys know how to run SQL server, but they don't know how to do APIs. So you sometimes have to match those two things together. And so I think your CCOE is small at first, regardless of the size of the business, because you're focusing on a first initial project or initial set of things, but it has to have the right skill sets of all those things. And I think you can't find that unicorn employee. Not everyone has a Ryan Lucas who understands all those things you just talked about. Not all of them have a John.
Ryan Lucas doesn't understand all those things. He just talks real big.
It's true, exactly. So there's strengths and weaknesses. So you have to kind of build that team, and the unicorn is really about building the team to be the unicorn that has all those pieces and parts. And so you want to keep it small, you want to keep it nimble, but you want to make sure it has the key stakeholder aspects and thoughts. And in a mega enterprise where you're trying to really do a big, massive transformation, that includes HR. In a small organization, you can probably get away with not having that. Maybe an architect and a cloud guy and an engineer is enough. So you really have to kind of size your CCOE to the organization you're in and the massive amount of change you're trying to do, or the small amount of change you're trying to do in many ways.
I remember watching a TED talk about how nobody knows how to make a computer mouse. Nobody in the world can tell you exactly how to make a computer mouse, because you've got the oil and gas industry and the mining and the refining of the oil to turn into plastics. You've got the electronics side of things. You've got optics. You've got all kinds of different things. No single person in the world could tell you exactly how to make that. And I think the CCOE sort of has the same problem in a way, that not like I say, there's no Ryan Lucas available for everyone. But I think the CCOE needs to be diverse enough to have sort of somewhat expert coverage in the areas which you're currently trying to do transformations. So if you're doing a migration to the cloud and you have hybrid networking, you need networking people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's it's a team effort for sure, because no one person is ever going to know the skill set. And it's interesting because not only is it a technical skill set, but it's it's a mindset, right? So it almost is more important to be able to be a flexible thinker that can expand out of their boundaries of their current skill set and expertise, so they can understand a different perspective of the business, so they can help bridge that gap between two things and do the translation. And so it is quite a challenge, right? Because these are very technical, complex problems to solve for a business, and you have to do that in the way that you're communicating to other parts of the business in the language that they understand, and also trying to convince them to adopt a change and an impact to their day to day. And so it's a fun problem, but it's a difficult problem. And so it's, who the makeup of your team needs to be, people that are enthusiastic and very flexible in that way, and really want to encourage and drive change and, make the business better and be very driven to do so.
Yeah, and people who are trusted, I think, is important as well, because I think you can't necessarily hire a new team to become that cloud center of excellence. You need to have established trust with the C-suite or engineering or the other stakeholders in the journey.
You can hire that new team. It has other political ramifications that you need to be aware of. If you bring this new team in and you hire a CCOE team to do this and you give them all the stuff, it becomes why are they going to do all the cool new stuff? Mm-hmm. So I don't. Yeah. there's an advantage of having it being an isolated team, but there's a disadvantage if you don't make them inclusive to other teams as well. And so you have to balance those two sides of that equation. Because I think if you don't, you cause that rift that, there's animosity between the Cloud Center of Excellence team who's doing all this cool stuff and everyone else who's doing, NetApp filers. But it's a good question. Why can't you just add in, a couple of these key things into an infrastructure team, like a cloud infrastructure team, or even to an engineering team? Say, look, we'll just hire a couple of cloud people and we'll just hire an architect in his cloud. And why can't they be the CCOE?
Yeah, I think that some of that has to do with the fact that what's driving all of this and what's driving the adoption of cloud, I think has a lot to do with delegating, organizations delegating the authority and the accountability for infrastructure to product teams. And so now that it's been delegated, it makes more sense to have a group who's consulting and advising those organizations because you no longer can just put that group in place who controls that infrastructure.
I think it's key to any center of excellence that their overall arc for what they want to achieve in a business is to not exist at the end. I feel like you need a cloud center of excellence as part of that bootstrapping, but that cloud center of excellence is by its very nature can't do all the work that a traditional infrastructure team has been doing for the cloud. And so their job isn't, to replace the cloud infrastructure teams. Their job is to bring the cloud infrastructure teams on the journey with them and set them up like a Sherpa, here's all the things you're going to need. And here's all the, here's the differences in operating in this environment. It's, it's being able to teach a traditional networking team that, their role now is not to, enable routing or make firewall changes. Their job is to teach developer teams how to use networking tools, which ones are the right ones, what are the advantages, and teach those developer teams how to make educated choices, and then also be a center of excellence themselves or transform into a center of excellence where they're no longer doing network operational work. They are advising the rest of the business how best to take advantage of someone's networking tools.
I think one of the challenges too is when you're going on a cloud journey, right? And you're really taking this path. It's a transformation. And maybe it's tied to a digital transformation. Maybe it's tied to just a technology transformation you want to drive. I think this is really a chance to reset your business in a lot of ways. Like you've inherited, maybe 10 years ago you had COBIT, and then you got into ITIL and you built all this ITSM and you changed management and these complicated remedy processes, and you built all this out over time. And those things may be working just fine for you, but ultimately with the cloud, you want to start thinking about how to do those things differently and how do you get to be a cloud native. And what got you to be a tremendously successful company in a data center is not necessarily the thing that's going to make you terribly successful in a cloud world. And I think that's the big mistake a lot of companies make is they think, oh, the cloud team can just do, the infrastructure team can just do this, or the engineering team can just do this. And so they just take their existing thing and they try to then build it in the cloud and say, okay, we'll just do the same thing we do today, but we'll just do it in the cloud. And then you end up in, you go to cloud without auto scaling, you go to cloud without any thoughts to cost optimization. You build, you don't use native cloud services. You leverage vendors that you've always used forever, and they all tell you that they're cloud native and they can do cloud just amazingly well. And you didn't take the opportunity to rethink the way you fundamentally did some of the things that you did. And is that the right approach still today? And many times the answer is yes. And many times the answer is no. And you want to rethink it and you want to think about it differently. And some things are forced. Like you can't move SQL clustering out of the box to the cloud. Typically, you have to adopt always on, or you have to think about moving away from SQL technology altogether and thinking about more of a data strategy. And again, it kind of goes into like, what are you guys trying to do with your cloud? But I think that's the mistake that I see a lot of companies who struggle with their cloud journey is they didn't take the opportunity to rethink their cloud story and their infrastructure story and their go-to-market story. And so they end up moving a lot of debt with them. And then they have to, then they don't get the advantage of cloud at the end of the day, and they end up spending a lot of money.
Yeah. How many times have you had a team that's, they started adopting cloud because, they wanted to be agile and be able to, take the lead times of hardware provisioning down and reduce them down to minutes. And you find that if you put your traditional infrastructure team and you just sort of ask that team to sort of expand their domain to the cloud and manage it the same way they've been managing private data center stuff, that the bottleneck isn't the hardware purchase process, right? There's a bunch of process that is going to change, and deployment processes and different things that will keep you from being able to deliver. So understanding the advantages of why you want to adopt cloud is really important for a business, even before they start the CCOE, because what do they want? Do they want agility? Do they want cost savings? Do they want, the ability to innovate? Or do they want the flexibility of being able to turn things off and on, and really knowing that problem to solve before you start a cloud strategy is super important, because I've seen that mistake happen a bunch of times.
Yeah. To go back and answer the question about why you couldn't add a CCOE person to an infrastructure team, I think the difference is traditionally people have been very focused on very small sets of technologies. So, you'll have a network team, you'll have a database team, you'll have all kinds of teams, lots of different things. And they don't talk to each other in the same way that we see services being integrated in the cloud. I mean, if you deploy some services in the cloud, they may they have sort of consequences on each other, whereas previously they might not have done. And I think one of the functions of the CCOE is to have the 10,000 foot view down on how all these things are connected together, and how changing one thing somewhere will have an effect, or could have an effect somewhere else.
Oh yeah. I mean, just think about something like a state machine or step functions and its impact on the network or shared storage, right? Like it's really, that is a good point.
It's like, oh wow, this Lambda function can scale up to 20,000 calls a minute or something. Well, that's great, but how's the database going to respond to that?
Not well.
Yeah. We just melted the edge firewall down to molten slag.
Yeah. So I think that sort of holistic view is an important part of what the CCOE should bring.
Yeah. But this is what we're talking about is sort of hard for some companies though, and so I think there's an opportunity for partners like Foghorn in these kind of conversations as well to maybe bring in that in-depth cloud expertise you're missing, or bring in somebody who's been there, done that, and kind of gotten the t-shirt. I mean, that's why I made my career on being that guy who's got the t-shirt, and I go in and I fix SaaS companies. That's what I do. That's what I love to do as a job, and that's all through the cloud transformation lens, the DevOps transformation lens. But I'm one person, Ryan's one person, John's one person. And so, taking advantage of a partner like Foghorn is a great way to do this as well. And you can augment your team while you're hiring the right people, or they can even help you find the right people in some cases too. So I think there's, this is not an area that you have to go on your own, take advantage of a partner too, in many ways.
Yeah, and definitely. I think that's the right approach. This isn't something you can outsource. Find a partner who says, you're better off never building this capability yourself. You should outsource it to us. We're great at it. I think the right model is find the Justin and the Ryan and the Jonathan. While you're looking, you can't sit still and wait to move forward with your innovation, your cloud initiatives and everything. So bring in a partner who's excited to help you along the way, and also comfortable working themselves out of a position with that company in that role, with the expectation that you're going to do a great job and there's going to be other ways for them to use you in the future.
Yeah, it's a natural fit for consultancy, right? Like here's the expertise, and let's teach you all the things and get you rolling. And it's I've been on the infrastructure side of things, trying to figure out this new cloud thing, and having a partner was absolutely key. I think Peter taught me, the first baby steps of cloud.
Yeah. In the conference room.
For sure. Right. Yeah. And it was super helpful, and it definitely accelerated the business and got me pointed in the right direction where I could go then learn and make decisions. Primarily that I shouldn't be talking to the business, but at least not directly. But yeah, no, it's great to have that expertise and and be able to sort of leverage that, especially as a temporary sort of solution to build that in house.
Agreed. Well, that was great. Next week we'll be talking about, now that you've kind of defined your CCOE, like how do you establish its charter, and then what do you do first? How do you start? What do you focus on? And so we'll talk about kind of a high level about some of that next week, and we'll see you next week here in the cloud.
See you later.
That was awesome. See you guys.
Bye, everybody.
And that is the Week in Cloud. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Foghorn Consulting. Subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and tweet us your feedback at #TheCloudPod. Or join our Slack channel, go to our website, thecloudpod.net for sign-up instructions.
All right. One of the things that I am super excited about is that it's CES time. And, we created a podcast 2 years ago or 3 years ago now focused on cloud. And then I can't talk about geeky stuff like CES. So I'm super excited that we created this after show because CES it's been a dream of mine for a long time to go to it. But then it's always the week after New Year's. And we, definitely have enjoyed, like seeing all the cool tech stuff. So I found an article that kind of summarized what's going on in the CES world, and so there's some cool stuff out there, and so I kind of summarized it for you guys in the show notes. The first one that I found that I just rolled my eyes at pretty hard is Sony apparently is making an electric vehicle car by teaming up with Honda. So you're not actually making an electric vehicle car, you're just putting your name on it, and then they decided that they're going to name this car Afeela.
Oof. I mean, I like Sony's design aesthetic, and I'm a big fan of Sony not developing a car because Honda's been doing it a lot longer. So like I kind of like that, and I think they're, as far as two companies go, they're very whatever the word is for good together. Since language has left me, but the name, I don't know if I can go with the name. Like Afeela?
Yeah, that makes no sense.
Like I feel ya?
I feel ya.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if the controls were like PlayStation branded or something.
Yeah, I mean, which way are they going to go? Are they going to go the super sleek Sony, like high-end sort of Apple thing? Or are they going to go like the lots of neon?
Make sure you know when he's set the like invert X-axis button before you start driving.
So other than dumb car names, a Samsung apparently showed a concept that looks terrible, but it's basically a combination of a folding screen plus a flexible screen that can stretch out basically as like a companion monitor thing. I don't really know why I would want the screen that's going to definitely fail within the first 18 months of my owning it, but if you want it, you can apparently have this maybe sometime in the future if it's ever gets out of concept phase, because again, it's CES. Like to show you a bunch of crap that never comes.
I kind of hope the sort of technology around flexibility and stuff actually helps make the rest of the cell phones a little bit more resilient, because it's highly frustrating spending $100 on a phone and you can put a case on it, but if you drop it on the wrong thing, it's going to smash.
Yeah.
So whatever they can do to help improve resilience of mobile technology by doing research like this, then that's kind of cool. I'm saving my Assurian $7 a month charge to insure the damn thing.
I just know I'm outside the target demographic now, just because like a folding screen sounds like the antithesis of what I want, right? Like I had a flip phone, it wasn't good then. I don't know why I would want one. Every time I see
the Galaxy Fold, I'm always like, yeah, I'm gonna pass. Like I'm sure it's coming to Apple someday, because again, I'm an Apple fanboy on the phone side, but I don't know that I'm gonna be excited when it comes, if it ever does. But
yeah,
the other one that kind of caught my eye and interest was there's a laptop from Asus that gives you glasses free 3D, and all I can think is like, so now I have a laptop that I have to look at in a very specific angle. That sounds great. Yeah, really, really love that.
Even Nintendo sort of abandoned the 3DS, didn't they? Because it was just not good Bill's eyes.
Remember when every TV had a 3D option for like 2 years, and then they just stopped out of nowhere?
I still have one of those.
It was funny over the holidays. Avatar movie came out, and 3D had kind of disappeared from the Cineplex. I hadn't seen a 3D movie in forever, or even when advertised, and then all of a sudden it's back, back with a vengeance with Avatar, and I'm hoping it goes away again because I actually mostly hate 3D movies, but I did really enjoy Avatar in 3D. It's fun.
I kind of wonder what's going to win.
Right?
Do you think decent augmented reality glasses will eventually win out over handheld devices? I mean,
I would think so.
Yeah, I think sci-fi movies are a great predictor of the future, and I think that's exactly, if it's built in and native and easier than remembering to charge your phone, remember to bring your phone, and then I think that it's the adoption will be there for sure.
Yeah, I keep thinking of Futurama now. I'm gonna have to go find the episode with the iPhone where it's literally pull your eyelid down and pop it right in there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's always massively big TVs. I saw a 97-inch TV from LG, a new OLED, but with no cables. That was interesting. It's going to use a 128 hertz wireless band. I thought it was, again, like, is that going to work well for 4K video at 120 frames per second? I don't know. But that was just something that jumped out to me. What did you guys see from CES? Anything that kind of got you excited?
I totally forgot it was going on until you brought it up. So I feel that I'm just out of touch again. I have been making like an effort to stay a little bit less on technology, because over the holidays I delved into technology to ignore my children. So I've been trying to be a little bit more present. So, but it's always really exciting to see what they announce, and even though a lot of it isn't real, like I like the advances in technology that it sort of hints at in its future, and so now that you've reminded me, I'm super excited to go read about it. And this is cool.
Well, I did find something for you that I thought was right up your alley. So it's from a company called Aska, and it's the first actual flying car. It only cost you $789,000.
Shut up and take my money.
But fine. You'll be able to apparently buy this thing someday, allegedly. Once it gets FAA approval, and it'll be a flying car that you can have. It'll take you places. So I thought that was right up your alley. And then I thought also for your New Year's resolutions, and this is also for me because being a larger person, there's a treadmill desk that will charge your laptop only when you're pedaling. So.
I love it. Forcing functions.
So I thought, I could take advantage of that as well. But although it does get a little close to a Black Mirror episode of a similar style.
That was 15 million merits right there. Sorry, I can't come to work today. My legs are too tired.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, having suffered through a broken foot, this would have been interesting, but I guess at least it remains optional.
And then for Jonathan, I did find something for you as well, because I know you're really into electric cars, particularly with Teslas. And so I found you the Tesla of the Sea. It's Candela's C8 EV hydro-hull boat, which is a battery-operated boat for only $390,000. Autonomous boating.
Only $390,000.
Chump change for Jonathan.
Yeah. So it's a little bit pricey for you, but other than that, it's electric and it's for you. So we live near water, so I can see you getting value out of this.
All right. Oh, might make the commute across the bay nice, I guess.
Yeah.
Better than the ferry.
Yeah.
Well, anything you saw, Jonathan, that jumped out at you?
I saw some weird like Alexa integration things. That there was some Alexa funded research into like home automation things and stuff like that. Like, well, if they just killed half the Alexa team and abandoned that, like
they just emptying the chamber.
They just missed the memo. I don't know.
There's definitely some interesting Matter devices coming out this year for IoT home device automation stuff. There's so much though. We could talk about this for a whole podcast show on its own. But
one thing I did notice was the Amazon Sidewalk network, which is very controversial to begin with, where sharing your little bits of bandwidth with strangers walking past your house. I'm seeing more and more devices that can actually integrate with Amazon Sidewalk now.
Interesting. I hadn't seen anyone adopt it past the initial hubbub.
I believe it was like a natural gas leak detector or something. So,
I was hearing an advertisement on the radio for Xfinity home Wi-Fi and home internet phone service. So you can basically have a phone service that runs on Xfinity for cell phone, but also uses Xfinity Wi-Fi. And I can see that being intriguing. Like if you could use Amazon Alexa devices for some type of communication device and as a subscription, there's potential to something like that. But again, you have to get past all the privacy concerns. You got to get past all the other issues with it first.
Well, Xfinity's been doing this for
Oh, yeah.
years, right? That was the other funny thing about the sidewalk thing was, like it was a big selling point for a long time. For if you're an Xfinity customer subscriber, there's free Wi-Fi everywhere, which isn't true because it's terrible. And everyone who was smart enough to realize that their home router was producing 2 Wi-Fi networks turned that right off. But it is the exact same thing. Kind of crazy.
Right. Well, CES is still going on, so maybe there'll be more next week we want to talk about. But I got to geek out about CS with you guys, which is